Thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is the Metro Blue Line Community Advisory Committee and Business Advisory Committee meeting. This is an interim meeting. And before we get into more details, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nkango Sigolo. I am the new manager of public involvement. Many of you have been seeing Sophia in this position, and I'm taking over for Sophia as she moves on to other things. So we will be working together as we advance the Metro Blue Line extension project. So with that, if we could go around and, for staff to introduce themselves, and then we'll get to the committee members. And I could go ahead and ask Nick to jump in and introduce himself for folks who may not know him.
All right. A lot of folks here know me, and for those who don't, I'm looking forward to meeting in person and getting your input and having discussions. But I'm Nick Landwehr. I'm the Director of Engineering and Design for the Blue Line project. I'm a Metro Transit employee, and I've been with the Blue Line Extension project since 2015. And prior to that, I was on the Green Line project on the Central Corridor. So thanks a lot. And I'll turn it over to Kelsey, because that's who I see.
Great, thanks, Nick. I'm Kelsey Young. I'm the environmental project manager, and I've been with Metro Transit since 2015, and I work on both the Green Line extension and Blue Line extension projects.
All right, Panu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Panu Vu. I am one of the community outreach coordinators with Metro Transit. I'm still pretty new to my role. I think it's been about 7 months, and so pretty excited to get to know everyone. And yeah, thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you, Panu. Kirsten.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Yeager. I'm also a community outreach coordinator. I focus on Robbinsdale and Crystal and the Latino communities of the corridor. And I also help with the CAC. So I'm looking forward to getting to know those of you who are new members of our committee.
All right. Thank you. Neha.
Hi, everyone. I am Neha Damle. I am the new environmental lead. I just joined a couple months ago, so getting to know project in more detail now. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Kathy. All right. Well, continue on. Kathy, if you're able to jump in, I know you might not be able to jump in right away, but feel free to. Joan.
Oh, hi, everybody, and thanks, Nkango, for calling me out. Joan Van Holla, Hennepin County Engagement Services. I coordinate the Blue Line LRT cohort. It's a group of 9 community and cultural organizations that are all helping us out with the engagement for the next year.
Thank you, Joan. Carrie. Carrie Pierce. I see Carrie's still muted. We'll go ahead and call on Scott. I saw you logged in. Scott, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Reed. I'm with a consulting firm known as HDR, and we are supporting Kelsey and Neha on the development of the environmental document, and I'm just here to listen in today.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Am I missing any other staff? I think that's
Calvin. Yeah.
Kelvin, yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Calvin Johnson. I am the founder and CEO of Roxanne Media. We are a multimedia company. I'm also a founding member of the Liberian Business Association here in the Americas, LIBA for short. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. We're gonna call on Adam.
Hello, Adam Hutchins, Hennepin County resident, Minneapolis, North Minneapolis resident, and I'm a CAC appointee from the Hennepin County.
Thank you, Adam. We're gonna call on Lex.
Good evening, everyone. Lex Brand with the City of Minneapolis, the Public Works Transportation Planning and Programming alongside Kelsey.
All right, and I see Donna Sanders is logged in, and Donna is with the cohort. Donna, are you able to speak, or you're on the right? We'll continue to Ellis.
Hey everybody, I'm Ellis, CAC, Hennepin County. I live in Robbinsdale, just outside of North, and yeah, super excited to still be doing this, but in a good way.
You, we call Kelsey. I don't want to butcher your last name. Fogged.
It's pretty close. Kelsey Coates. I'm a transportation planner with the City of Minneapolis, so staff here just to support and listen along.
All right, thank you. Giuseppe Marari.
Yeah, Giuseppe Marari. I am a CAC member for the City of Minneapolis. I've been part of this group since, oh my God, maybe like 2015, 2016, since it began. So I don't necessarily have a lot to catch up on, or, but I get to bring a little bit of history to the table. So I'm looking forward to working with the new members.
All right, thank you. Jeff Gerton.
Good evening, folks. Jeff Gerton, CAC member for Brooklyn Park. New to the project, looking forward to representing our city and finding out more about the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Jericho Hoggart.
Good afternoon. My name is Jericho Hugger. I am a CAC member, new. Look forward to learning and helping out any way I can.
Thank you. And Rob, we missed you. If you want to go ahead and chime in as well. Okay, we'll go to Jammers.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. My name is Jamel Staples, the CEO of Renewable Energy Partners. New to the committee, looking to learn as much as possible. North Minneapolis resident, business owner, and also property owner along Plymouth Avenue, not far from where the light rail is scheduled to go.
Thank you. We'll go to Jonathan Hansen.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hansen. I'm a new appointed member of the CAC. I've lived in Brooklyn Park, North Minneapolis, and now Robbinsdale.
Thank you. And finally, we will go to Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Greenberg. I was previously the CAC co-chair, and I am on the CAC representing Robbinsdale.
Great. Thank you, Jason. We also have Ken Rogers.
Good evening, everybody, and happy to be here. My name is Ken Rogers. I am the appointed representative for the Transportation Access Advisory Committee of the Met Council, which is a group of individuals living with disabilities, and I represent the disability perspective on this committee. I'm continuing, and I'm happy to hear some familiar voices and happy to hear some new voices as well. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Ken. We appreciate your participation. Remember, we met with Ken when we were working on Central Corridor. So we started on Central Corridor in 2007, and Ken has been a really active contributor. Thank you again, Ken, for being with us. Appreciate it.
Nikongo, I had a brief issue when you introduced me before, but as you had mentioned, Rob, so my name's Rob Hume. I'm part of the engineering team working with Nick and others, and did a lot of the work developing the alignment as it's progressed so far. And I'm joining the call really just to hear thoughts, issues, concerns from the group as it relates to design moving forward.
Thank you, Rob.
Hi.
Anybody?
I'm Tamia Brown. I am a new CAC member, and I have been a resident of North Minneapolis for 30 plus years.
Thank you. I see Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm staff with the City of Brooklyn Park, just here to listen in this evening.
Great, thank you. And I see Sabrina.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I am Sabrina Williams. Okay, great. My camera isn't working, but I am a BAC member representing the City of Brooklyn Park as a nonprofit organization. I am the founder and executive director of Excel Academy for Higher Learning Charter School. So I'm here to learn more about the Metro Blue Line and how that will affect our community. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Anyone else that I might have missed?
Yeah, this is Steve Spaulding. I'm a new CAC member representing the City of Golden Valley.
Thank you, Steve.
And I'm Tyrone Plunkett. I'm a new BAC member representing Brooklyn Park, resident and business owner.
Thank you, Tyrone. Appreciate it.
I'm John Barbs with Move Minneapolis, the transportation management organization in downtown. And I'm a BAC member and excited about the opportunities for transportation right into downtown.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Webley. I am a business owner on the north side and a resident of 7 years. So happy to be here. I am a part of the BAC.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? So it looks like we have called on everyone. All right. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. I know our CAC, BAC meetings are expected to kick off in November. As we continue to enlist new members to our committees, we're anticipating that we should have a couple more members who will be joining before we get our meetings kicked off. But this is really an interim meeting, and we wanted to bring everybody to the table so that we could start to talk about alternatives, and so that we could at least gather some input from the group as we continue to inform the Corridor Management Committee And we'll go through the presentation here. We've got a couple of route options that are on the table for further study, and we kind of wanted to bring those forward so we could talk about them. And as we continue to engage our community, we want to hear what else is being said out there, or if there are any additional inputs that we might have missed, and really enlisting your help in getting this going. So that's really the purpose of the meeting tonight. The Corridor Management Committee is scheduled for this Thursday, and would like to have Jason kind of report out to the CMC, and kind of saying what you're hearing from the community, or what are your thoughts about these route options, so that we're continuing to inform the process. So with that, I'm gonna plug in our presentation here so we can get going. Just quick thing about, let's switch this around. Quick thing about ground rules. I'm gonna ask if anyone is not speaking, please mute your microphone. If you need to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll let you speak, or if you can write a question in the chat, that will also be great. Then we'd be able to get to it. Second here, I need to switch things around a little bit here.
Hey, I'm on mute. So once Nikanga gets this up, as we're going through the presentation, please raise your hands for questions and stuff, and we'll try to stop along the way to pick up any discussion and questions also here, so we can get the input from you guys.
All right. Thank you. So today's topics really will be talking about community outreach report, some of the work that our engagement group has been carrying on in the field to continue to gather and engage communities along the alignment. We will also cover the environmental, and we'll cover environmental analysis and staff recommendation on project scope. And then we will be talking about anti-displacement update. So with that, we'll kick it off to Nick to get us through the first slides of our community and outreach engagement process.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Nick Landwehr. I'm engineering and design with the project office. I work for Metro Transit. And happy to be here tonight and just kind of ground us where we're at. So, we are still in that very, we did a lot of work previously with the project, had to do a pivot. The last couple of years, we've really been rolling up our sleeves to identify a route alignment modification, a modified route alignment for the project. And so now we're getting into our environmental work. So what you see on the slide here is, we back in 2016 had a final environmental impact statement and a record of decision for the project, meaning that the FTA recognizes our project. Since then, with our route modification and our route alignment modification, we're going back and looking at our environmental work and doing a supplemental draft environmental impact statement that will then go into a supplemental final environmental impact statement. So we need to, document all the work that we're doing here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But that yellow box is where we're starting out. We're just starting on our supplemental draft environmental impact statement. So as you go on the right-hand side of the slide, we needed to select our design options that we're moving into that draft. And now we're going to prepare that draft documentation here. We'll be working on that through this fall and into the winter. And then we'll select those preferred routes and bring those forward into our final environmental document. So, this is a process that it doesn't happen right away. We've got a lot of time here to work on it here for the next over a year. And so this is a chance, at the beginning that we can listen to everybody. We can hear your suggestions. We can walk through and document, the work that we're doing as a project. So next slide. So just kind of recap here of what we're doing and of our September quarter management committee meetings. So our project team has continued to do outreach and engagement along the corridor to talk about the route options that we're going forward with, and we will, as we keep going through the project, we will continue that outreach, the public engagement, the conversations with the community. So one of the things that we did is we had quite a few options to recommend that we carry forward in our environmental scope on the alignment. So, the one area was Target Field Station to West Broadway. We rolled out, I think, about 4 or 5 different options of ways to get there, and our goal has been to narrow that down to 2 options to evaluate. So we'll talk about those a little bit more here in detail in this presentation. And then the other thing that we wanted to look at is along West Broadway Avenue from basically on the east side of 94 to about Irving Avenue area. Look at options along West Broadway that may incorporate 21st Avenue. Again, we had 4 options that we brought out to the public, and we're narrowing those down to 2 options that we would carry forward in our environmental documentation. So one of the things that we're doing here is coming up is next week, we hope to publish in the Environmental Quality Board, the EQB Monitor. This is a state publication. The description of our project scope, what we're going to be studying as we go into our supplemental draft environmental impact statement. And so this is kind of a required step in the Minnesota rules that we need to follow here that kicks off that draft environmental impact statement. And with that, there'll be a 20-day public comment period that will start, when this publishes next week. But that doesn't say that doesn't mean that there's no more comments after that. We will continue to accept comments from our project partners, from the public, as we go through our environmental work, our draft environmental work, and even into our final environmental work, and as we get into design. So, Jason, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious for the 20-day public comment period. Is this like specific to the environmental, like the description of the project scope and the details that you're rolling out? I guess what are you looking for comments and feedback on in that 20-day comment period?
Well, I could say, Jason, you can comment on anything. We'd hope that it would be more, in this case, would be more specific to the project scope that we're rolling out. But that doesn't mean that, the 20-day period ends. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop accepting comments and addressing them and responding to them. So we'll be able to discuss our, respond and have comments on everything as we move forward. But it's part of that requirement, and I think how it was explained to me, and Kelsey can explain it or tell me if I'm wrong. This state rule is kind of set up for, like, if a mining company came forward, they need to publish it. So the state wanted to get that 20-day notice in there before things went forward. In this case, it's a mandatory step, but at 20 days ends doesn't mean that we stop taking comments and stop addressing them. So does that answer your question, Jason?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, so it can be on anything. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like, if it wasn't an environmental comment, that it wasn't taken as feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
It can be anything. As all the comments that we get, we record them, respond to them.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Nick. And as we continue our environmental process, continue to gather input, get comments and record those appropriately. Thank you.
Right. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Nakago. Here to.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Kind of wanted to briefly talk about, our engagement process. And Nick mentioned, two segments, the segment between 21st Avenue and West Broadway, and the segment between Target Field and Broadway. And as you can see, we're on slide 6, just for reference. As you can see on the right here, on this graphic on the top right portion here. So these are the options that are being studied. Basically, we have light rail coming west, and then going either on West Broadway or going south on 21st Avenue North. And so for this segment, the Target Field to West Broadway route options to the bottom right here, and I think we have better graphic as we move forward. I just kind of wanted to point these out as we move forward. We'll see those, but 4 options, as Nick mentioned, were being looked at as far as inclusion in the study process. So we have a Leendale option in purple here. So that kind of goes over 94, kind of hugs Leendale and continues west before it would turn south on either West Broadway or 21st Avenue. And then in green here, that's our West 94 option, which would kind of go along the freeway and then south on West Broadway. And then looking also at the East 94 option here in purple, various routes going west along the freeway there, and then turning south to go either on West Broadway or 21st Avenue North. So as we engage the community, we asked very specific questions as to what the community would like to see, in as far as what options the community would like to see advance and why. And then what was important for the community, and if there was anything else that the community would like to know. So we carried out various meetings. We carried out 3 in-person meetings and 2 virtual workshops. We gathered tons of input. So we had about 60 participants, checked in with businesses and community members. We set out an interactive map, and were able to collect 123 comments, and we received additional in-person comments through a survey. We received plus 7 additional, more than 70 responses through survey or in-person feedback. One item that we did, as far as an innovation on our outreach efforts, it's sometimes it's really hard to get the message out to the community. We used a variable message sign, so that we could put a message out there about the upcoming meetings. You know, we saw that was really important, and we'll continue to look at, you know, other avenues or other means to get the word out in addition to what we'd already been doing. You know, website, newsletters, social media, mailing directly notices to businesses and residential properties, you know, emails to our contact list, and door knocking. So to the bottom right there, you'd see photographs from a meeting we had on September 28th at the Franklin Middle School. So our team is out there. We have a very robust team that is actually supplemented by our cohort group, and, you know, helping us get the word out. So really, as I mentioned in the
Nganko,
yes,
I think James had his hand raised. I don't know if that was, he lowered it, but it was up. I don't know, James, if you want to, did you have a question that you wanted to ask on the previous slide?
Well, I guess my issue is that, like, I haven't really been engaged to this point, so I don't have all these documents. So I'd assume you're going to share this PowerPoint after this event.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We'll share this PowerPoint. Yes, and if you should be on email, we should have your email address. We sent out some materials early on, but, you know, we could, you know, you can ping us, and we'll continue to provide additional information to you as needed. Or if you have any questions, you know, feel free to reach out. Our outreach team is doing a great job. You know, we'll continue to engage the community as, you know, as necessary, so that, you know, we're providing adequate information, and so that folks keep stay informed about the project. So really, this is the target field station to West Broadway route options, and I kind of covered this already, although the graphic was very small. Here you can see we've got a couple of options from target field. The purple, that's the Lindell option, you know, going west and then south, either on Broadway or 21st Avenue North. And in green here, that's the West 94 option, which was also part of the options to be studied, and has now been dropped, but, you know, was also going to either go, it was going south on West Broadway, and then our East 94 option, which would either go south on Broadway or on 21st Avenue North. And these bubbles that you see over here, these are proposed station locations. And, you know, as we continue studying these options, you know, those will be key elements to look at as we advance the environmental process here.
Yeah, a couple hands up in the Congo too. I think I saw CW had a hand up, and then Adam Hutchins has a hand up also.
Yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. So on the green version, the 94 West route option, the blue bubble site location is pretty close to 94. Is it in consideration to create a transit connection there for buses, rapid transit buses on 94, similar to the Lake Street crossover on 35, so that rapid transit could get linked with the train here?
You know, if that,
go ahead,
not a specific coordination there right now, Adam, but we would want to try to incorporate any of these stations in with transit the best we can. So, I mean, we've had a discussion a little bit with, you know, maybe some of the different transit studies happening, but you know, we would likely not have a transit center right there, but good connections is if we could. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just feels like a missed opportunity with how many buses use that 94 corridor right there, not to create a connection point when you're so close, or at the Broadway.
Yeah.
I suppose they're not stop slated there, but just some connectivity between the two seems like a missed opportunity if we don't create some option there.
Yeah, and it's something we would evaluate, but you know, sometimes those connections were so close to downtown that, you know, it may not be that effective, but you know, we will look at how we can make those robust connections with all the different modes.
Thank you.
CW, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, Nick, if I recall from the earlier BAC meetings that were happening, there was an impact assessment done in terms of like property, economics, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if any of that has changed as a result of these options that you guys are going to further do studies.
Yeah, Chris, we'll evaluate more in each one of these as we dive down into there, what, you know, potential property impacts will be. We do have some of those rollout maps. They are on our project website now, and properties that we know would, you know, have an impact enough that, you know, maybe it's a total taking, you know, that the building structure would be affected by it. We're showing those on there, and that is part of the evaluation that we'll be looking at.
Thank you, Nick.
I think
there's a
question
question in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Toby, I can tell you so the question is, we call the east of I-94 option. You know, what we were trying to do is get over to Washington, and you can even see on this map the dotted line that kind of goes diagonally over just south of Plymouth and then up to Washington. As we were evaluating it, there was no way there. It's very difficult for us to get up to Washington until we're like almost up to West Broadway without very substantial impacts, meaning apartment buildings gone. I think that and we'll talk a little bit more about this option too, but that diagonal that you see on that far pink dash line, that would go right through the middle of like the Twin Cities International School. And so that we'll talk a little bit more how we narrow these down, but that would probably go away just because of the large property impacts that would have. So so hopefully that's a good answer for you. Or and James.
Sorry, trying to unmute. So you said that where these check marks are, you said that would have significant property acquisition. And so have you all had discussions with those folks or no?
The Twin Cities International School, yes. We sat down and met with them in detail, talked about, you know, what their plans are, intents. I mean, they have a brand new facility built in 2018. They got like over 1,000 students there. So, I mean, that's obviously a property that we don't want to impact, and they want to stay where they are.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Very good questions. Appreciate it. All right. So we'll continue on. So really for that option between Target Field and West Broadway, you know, some of the responses that, you know, were received, and I want to point out that, you know, we received 66 responses, and really, so it was leaning towards the East I-94 option. As you know, that's what we heard from the community. It looks like the community would like to see that advance, and then Leendale was the next that you know, was favored by the community as we advance this process. So West 94, not quite so much, but really why did folks select you know, prefer those routes versus the other? You know, they're considering station location and access to stations, property impacts, development opportunities, and safety, and then connections between LRT and buses and things of that nature. So really main themes, main themes that we've heard, from the segment between Target Field Station and Broadway is that, it should minimize the impacts and disruptions to residential communities, maintain the fabric of the community, consider access to, access for school buses and limit impacts to some of the properties that Nick had already alluded to, the Twin Cities International School, and provide more information really and solutions. So one other item is, walkability and visibility, so that there is that feeling of safety as we continue to study these options. For the West Broadway and 21st Avenue route option, so there are 4 options to be considered, and I'm just going to go through them quickly, as I know this will be covered in subsequent slides. So really looking at having LRT on the center of West Broadway with 2-way traffic. That was one of the options. That was option A. Second option was looking at having LRT on West Broadway with 1-way traffic split on West Broadway and 21st Avenue. And then the third option was having LRT and traffic split on West Broadway and 21st Avenue. And then the final option was to have LRT on 21st Avenue only with no change on West Broadway. And as we advance, so some of the responses that we got about this particular options. And again, I want to point out that we got 33 responses. Is option A was favored, and then option D came in second, and then the 2 options C and B. Really, why station location continues to be a big thing. So that's a concern that came on resurfacing across the board. Property impacts, transit connections, and impacts to businesses and development opportunities. The common themes across West Broadway, 21st Avenue options, supporting local businesses, economic development, and really continuing to pay attention to where stations are located, such that, it creates that, safety net, for folks who will be walking to the station, but, back and forth, and then, connections, to local routes, and then, again, paying attention to the fabric of the community. And then what is important to you in evaluation of this route? So these are some of the questions that, were asked, and, and I mentioned, I showed those in earlier slides. Really, folks would like to see a lot of investment in the community, green space, making that area inviting. Environmental justice is one thing we heard. Continued themes on safety, making sure that, we're considering ridership and travel times. And then, station location, investment in the community, and also street improvements. Property impacts, definitely that's also across the board. So when we asked folks, if there was anything else that they wanted to know, this is what we heard: providing options, for local routes to continue operation, ped improvements, community fabric, so that we're continuing to maintain those and incorporate those in station design. Considering elevation and separation of to decrease LRT and LRT traffic and ped interactions, and then most importantly, paying attention to the community, what is best, for the community. We also heard that, we should consider additional stations. So these are the really good comments that we received as we advanced our engagement process for these route options.
Hey, Nakanga, we have two hands up. We have
Yes.
James and Adam.
James, go ahead.
I'm sorry, my hand. I meant to take it down.
Okay. Adam?
Quick question, and this might be something in a later meeting, but with the proximity of like single family dwellings so close to the Broadway route, what is the remediation for all the noise this is going to create so close to people's homes? Like, is there something in a program similar to like the Minneapolis Airport Commission where proximity to the landing areas or the flight paths sound studies are done and they remediate some of the windows and exteriors, or is that just kind of a collateral damage, I guess?
So noise is an item that is actually studied in the environmental process. And Kelsey, if you want to jump in quickly, you can, and talk about what is studied as far as noise and looking at the current conditions and the addition of LRT and how that affects people's livelihoods. Go ahead.
Right. Yes. We basically the analysis looks at the future noise with the project as compared to existing, and then where there are impacts, then there's a path to consider mitigation options. So that is something that will be part of our environmental impact statement process to be looking at noise impacts, certainly.
Can you briefly say what the remediation route would be? Like if there is homes that are going to have a greater decibel compared to their current one, like with the bell is pretty loud, I assume, compared to current traffic patterns.
Right. We have benchmarks for when mitigation is necessary or called for, and then we look at potential options. So that could not to say that this is necessarily appropriate for all settings, but we look at a noise wall, but we also could look at options that are at the receiver, so at people's homes, for example, that I think is what you're getting at, referencing the airport. But that the mitigation options are usually identified in the final environmental impact statement. So we're going to start off with trying to assess what are the impacts, looking at that, and then we can speak to some potential ranges of options. But the mitigation options are finalized down the line in the final environmental impact statement.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's been one of the prevalent questions I've been asked. Like, boy, there's homes awfully close. Isn't that a lot louder? That's like one of the biggest things I've heard. So just curious.
That will certainly be something that we'll study further. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
There's another.
Yeah,
there's another question from Jeff.
Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, I've got two quick questions. East 94 question. Broadway looks to be pretty busy with vehicle traffic. If we run the light rail system down Broadway, do we create additional backups of vehicle traffic? And I'm thinking about recent experiences just getting off 94 southbound, getting off at Broadway. If we back that up much more, we're going to be spilled out onto 94. Have we looked at that? What do we do?
So I can answer that, Jeff, and I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about some of these routes here in a few slides. But yes, that again, we're going to make a design that we'll evaluate what traffic impacts would be out there, and the mitigation is try to design away from those issues if they are identified, and go from there. So we're still very early here identifying these routes and how we would connect in and how we handle the traffic, intersections, interchanges, things like that.
Okay. And then on And I apologize, these are newbie questions. I know some of you
Yeah.
folks have been working on these for years. So the station locations, does Met Transit have a plan to feed those locations with bus routes from the communities? We're going to shift the busing to feed these.
Yes, so I could answer that too, Jeff. We try to locate these stations. I mean, that's one of the criteria, and we'll talk about that in a bit too here, that, we want to have those robust transit connections. So, for instance, on West Broadway, we've got, the D line that will be starting up here, and we're going to try to get stationed very close to that. So those connections, the C line up at Penn, same thing there, and then we'll try to make those robust transit connections. And then, while we're in construction, we also look at our routes and do a route study, and then determine how to get everything to work together. Because the light rail is really kind of designed to be like the backbone, the spine of the system, and be able to feed to it. So.
And I wanted to add to that, Nick. So typically, 2 years before revenue service begins, Metro Transit does what we call a bus sector study. So they look at all existing bus routes, and then it's basically a community process where we set up open houses and have folks come and comment, and then we look at existing routes and how to better connect LRT to buses and buses to LRT. So bus schedules are kind of shuffled again a little bit to be able to bring folks to the light rail when it's available, and so that they're connecting again to buses and leaving the station. So that's one thing that will be done before operation begins.
Excellent. Thank you both.
All right, thank you. So in front of you here, you'll see October meetings. So we've set up a meeting in each city. So Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Park all the way to Minneapolis. Each one would have a meeting, and we try to set this up, in the evening so that we could get as many folks attend. In addition, we'll also have 2 virtual meetings for folks who cannot make it to the locations to interact with project staff. These are the dates. We have created a flyer, that was actually included in the communication that was sent out by Panu. And again, would like to enlist your help, to get the word out so we could reach as many people as we can. Really we'll be talking about specifics, in each city, park and ride locations and things of that nature. So we really need to reach out to as many people as we can, so that we're gathering that input, from the community, and help and have that help us inform the process as our environmental process goes on.
We have a hand raised from Ty.
Yes, Ty, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about the routes up Broadway. So if that's the routed plan or the planned route, would on-street parking be eliminated?
Yes, Ty, in our options on West Broadway, we are all of those options would eliminate on-street parking on West Broadway. But we know that is something that we need to address, and how we look at managing parking along that area. So we'll be working with business owners. We'll be pulling together, specific business owners in areas. For instance, we've already had discussions along West Broadway and Penn, and we'll continue along the corridor to look at what are our options there to address that, to look at. So.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So I'll pass this on to Nick to kind of talk about evaluation criteria.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the public meetings we've had and what we've talked about with our options here. And this is kind of get to the crux of it. So as we brought out those options, we tried to compare these options to evaluation criteria. So we have 5 different criteria that we're looking at that you can see: the right-of-way impacts, the transit effectiveness, the land use and economic development potential, operational considerations, and in compliance with street objectives. And a lot of this, so as we get into the right-of-way, we look at, what is the overall right-of-way width that we have to work within? We know we have very tight areas in portions of West Broadway where building faces are right up to the right-of-way, and sometimes there's a little bit more of a setback, so more room to work with. Level of acquisitions needed. We look at to see, what are those impacts? Are they a full acquisition to a property, a partial, or do we need just a small strip to tie in our work with it, during construction? We want to reduce the impacts. We want to reduce impacts to community assets out there, that the churches, the schools, the shopping, the best we can, and reduce the impacts to business operations with the design, and look at even how we reduce impacts during construction. Transit effectiveness. Oh, we're slow rolling. There you go. Thank you. Transit effectiveness. That's one of the things. What is the proximity to businesses and restaurants? We want to get the train and the stations where the people are, and where those community assets are, and then make sure that when we get the stations in place, that they're accessible, that you can get there conveniently and safely as a pedestrian, as a bike, and other transit routes. Again, as we talked about, making those transit connections. Land use and economic development. What is the compatibility with our project's anti-displacement objectives? We want to build this system for the folks that live in the communities that we're serving. So, how is our work compatible with that? Redevelopment potential of vacant and or impacted parcels on there. What are those opportunities? We want to increase and improve non-vehicular access to businesses also. This gets to making sure that we get our riders to businesses, and also address where there's areas of the parking. Operational considerations. We need to make sure that the light rail operates efficiently and safely, and we need to really look at traffic operations. Light rail is designed, and how we operate in the Twin Cities is designed to operate within traffic, and with the traffic. So we want to take in those considerations, how we get intersections to work and flow, and everything works smoothly, and then compliance with our street objectives. Again, for instance, City of Minneapolis has plans and guidelines of how to manage the street sections with their, the peds, the bikes, the rolling, the green space, vehicle travel, all that. So let's talk a little bit about, let's jump into how we score each one of these options that we're going to talk about. So I think we'll do this really quickly, but I can say we use a colored scale here to help. Where green is something that achieves the best performance, and then we graduate down there with, middle is neutral, and it doesn't make an impact that much one way or the other. And then as we get all the way to the left hand side of this scale, we're in red, would be unacceptable based on our project principles. So next slide, please.
There's a question, Nick, in the chat that says, do you provide the survey to the community and homeowners regarding transit effectiveness?
A specific survey here, I don't think that we have comment forms online. If you go to our website, bluelineextension.org, you can comment on there. On this, and do we have a survey up right now, or a comment form that people can talk a little bit about too?
No, I don't think we do at the moment. But talking about transit effectiveness, looking at the option to use LRT versus buses, is that what you're referring to?
Maybe we can come back to this one here. Yes, okay, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, did you?
I think there's an answer yes to your question.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, this are the there's a study that is done to look at alternatives and looking at transit zones and how folks travel and what mode of transportation they use. So this is some of the background work that is done. But as far as providing the community an opportunity to weigh in on what routes they specifically use, I don't believe we have done that, but this is something that we could definitely consider.
All right, I'm going to jump in here and just talk a little bit about the target field to West Broadway. So we've covered this slide a little bit here already with the routes under evaluation. The purple being the Lyndale, the green being the I-94 West option on the west side of I-94, and then the pink being the East I-94 option. So let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about how we evaluated this and discussions we've had with the public here. So as you can see up at the top, we put our recommendations. We kind of cut to the chase right away, but below it, we'll talk a little bit more about each one of the options. But with our recommendation, the Lyndale option, the purple one, we're recommending to evaluate further in our environmental impact statement. That's based on right-of-way impacts, the transit effectiveness, how we could get bus stops in that effectively and make those connections. The land use and economic development, there's that's fairly neutral as we look at that option. And then operational considerations, it works very well because it's street running and works that way. And then compliance with street objectives, it falls within those objectives, specifically in Minneapolis where we're at. The West 94 option is the one where we kind of skirt around to the west side. Had a lot of maybe not as many benefits as it did impacts. So right-of-way impacts, there would have been more right-of-way impacts taking that alignment. There was a few more properties that would have had to be full takes, full purchases, quite a bit of potential right-of-way impacts to residential properties along that area. Transit effectiveness, still a decent transit effectiveness with that. Our economic and land use is neutral again on that one. Operational considerations, it really had some bad operations with the location of the station and the crossing of both East Lyndale and Plymouth would have caused gates and a lot of traffic issues to work around and then just that alignment basically mostly ran not along the street. So really the street compliance objectives were not, but because of the impacts really outweighed the benefits of that, we are not recommending that we move forward with that one. The East of 94 option, which that was the one where we were trying to get over to Washington Avenue. Again, we're recommending to further evaluate that one. It has quite a bit more right-of-way impacts going that way. Neutral on the transit effectiveness, but there's potential, if zoning and everything work right for land use and economic development. Operational considerations, that's a really tough route. We're having to really make a lot of turns and snake around a lot of things. And then the street compliance objectives were fairly decent along that alignment. Next slide, please. So that's a recommendation for the that target field station to West Broadway. Can you go back, please? One more slide. There we go. All right. Next slide. Sorry about that. Okay. So then the next one we're talking about, these lay out the options a little bit better from between east of I-94 and roughly the Irving area. And this is an area where the right-of-way is very extremely tight along West Broadway, specifically how the buildings are right up to the, you know, with the zero setback. So they're right up to the right-of-way lines of the street right there. So the one option we look at is 3A, where we keep everything on West Broadway, and both directions of traffic go on there, both directions of light rail go on to that. 3B is where we split the vehicle traffic between 21st Avenue and West Broadway, keeping light rail on West Broadway. So all the light rail goes on there. 3C is where we split both the light rail and the traffic operations. And then 3D is where we keep West Broadway in the similar condition it is today, and then put light rail up onto 21st. And you can see that each one of these options, whether you come up Lyndale in the purple, or if you're in the pink, you're coming over from the east side of I-94. Next slide, please. So this would be the evaluation. So our recommendations going forward with that, based on, you know, evaluating this and having discussions with the community and our project partners, is option A. We're recommending to evaluate further and bring that into our environmental impact statement based on the criteria. Options B and C, because they start splitting the traffic or splitting the light rail, really not that favored with the project partners, with the public as we roll it out, and makes the operations, you know, for both road and light rail more difficult by splitting everything up that way. Option D, we're recommending to evaluate further in our EIS. So that one again is where we maintain West Broadway with vehicle traffic and put light rail operations on 21st. So I see a few hands up for questions. I think Jason.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, I don't know. It like automatically took my email and I couldn't put my name in there. I'm just curious on the evaluation. Is that designed as far as like the criteria? That's all handled by the project team, or is that handled by someone independent that makes those evaluations?
It is by the project team, but, you know, we work with our partners, you know, specifically in this location, it would be with the city of Minneapolis, and you know, we present this to the policymakers. We've brought it forward to the project, and it's really, it's not to compare each one of these options against each other. It's to compare each one of these options to the criteria. So yeah, again, I think it's fairly transparent the way we rolled it forward. I mean, folks can, you know, maybe argue that it's maybe we shaded it too green or not green enough, but, you know, I think in the end that they're fairly well based on good professional judgment and input that we're getting from folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, I guess that was the big drum roll of our evaluation, and then we'll talk a little bit about our staff recommendations on the project's scope and environmental analysis. So I'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Thanks, Nick. So as we referenced a little bit earlier, we have an upcoming step where we'll make an announcement about the project definition of what is being studied in the supplemental EIS process. And it includes the things laid out on this slide here, and I'll talk about each a little bit. So this notice that we're going to publish identifies why a supplemental EIS is needed, and the key thing here is that there are potentially significant changes to to the project's impacts based on the new route, and that we'll intend to study the full range of topics, looking back to our final EIS that was published in 2016. So we'll look at the same, range of topics, so environmental, social, and economic impacts. And I can talk about some examples in a little bit. The purpose of this document is to compare multiple options and also compare to a no build or a do nothing option, basically comparing to existing. And then through this process, one option would be identified to move forward. So our notice that we're publishing describes what's changed about the project since the final EIS. For some sections are pretty similar to what was previously evaluated, and then some sections are totally new. And we're anticipating that we'd publish our supplemental draft EIS next fall. Next slide there, please. So we have a description of the modified route and the recommendation, and I'll walk through just an overview, high level of what we're proposing to study further. And basically our notice will describe what's changed and what's new. So starting from the north part of the project up in Brooklyn Park, much of the alignment here is the same as in the final EIS. So light rail is on West Broadway Avenue. We'll study a proposed operation and maintenance facility north of Highway 610. And one change here is that the reconstruction and expansion of West Broadway is now part of the project. It was previously a separate project, but that's been folded in with the Blue Line Extension project for the purposes of this study.
A little bit of semantics there. It was always in the plans, but it wasn't part of our project study. So, so now we're studying it within the project.
Right. And just to note that, we'll look around, look for changes in the surrounding area and make sure that our plans of what we're studying, that everything's been updated. And also just want to note that pedestrian crossing at 63rd Avenue is also included in the project definition. All right, moving further south into the southern part of Brooklyn Park and Crystal, the light rail will now be studied to run through on the median on County Road 81 or Bottineau Boulevard. We'll be looking at stations at 63rd Avenue and Bass Lake Road. That'll include the station access and design. And then we'll also look at two options for the design at County Road 81 and Bass Lake Road. We'll look at both a conventional intersection with a pedestrian bridge over, and then we'll also look at an elevated structure for County Road 81 to go over Bass Lake Road in an interchange format. So this is just a graphic to show that area. We'll also be looking at the traffic capacity on Highway 81 or Bottineau Boulevard there. I'm looking at different roadway configurations, and we'll also be refining the station design and access. In Robbinsdale, we'll now be looking at light rail on, continuing on County Road 81 and new station locations. We'll be looking at one station location in downtown Robbinsdale and then another one at Lowry Avenue near North Memorial Hospital, and that'll be an elevated station that I think is shown in the next page. Yep, so there's the one station downtown, and then this graphic shows the area near North Memorial Hospital, and you can see the potential configuration here that we'll be studying further. All right, moving into Minneapolis, the light rail that we'll be looking at would be, running along West Broadway with new station locations. And then when we get to Irving Avenue, we'll be looking at two options. So we walked through a little bit the evaluation of how we arrived at those two options, but just to reiterate that we're looking at the two options, so light rail on West Broadway and traffic. And then we'll also look at light rail only on 21st Avenue. And then both of those options, as was previously stated, could connect into the other options on the table in Minneapolis as well. CW, do you have a question on that piece?
Yeah, so there is an option for it to go both east and west down 21st.
Yes, and actually, I think that's shown in the next slide here. If we want to pull forward to that one real quick. So yes, it would run on 21st Avenue and then could either continue on 21st or go on to Lyndale Avenue, depending on, you know, which of those options moves forward. So we'll be looking at all of those combinations. I think that covers it for these. And then moving along, we'll also compare two route options running on Lyndale Avenue, and then the option to the east of I-94. Those two options could connect in to either West Broadway or 21st, and both would include a new bridge over I-94. So just to recap, you know, our earlier graphics that we were looking at here had some other options, but things have been narrowed down to what's shown here. The Lyndale option would either use Olson Memorial Highway or 7th, and then the other option, the east of I-94 option, would use either 21st or Broadway on that north end. But this is kind of the overview of what we're moving forward with to study further. So all of this information is going to be summarized in this notice, this announcement that we're publishing, and we're looking to publish that next week. So that would kick off the public comment period that will last through November 7th. And that's, you know, specific to this topic, as we've touched on before. You know, we're always happy to get input from the community on any topic, but this is just the comment period specific to this topic. You know, if you have comments related to what I just talked through, the definition of the project, of what we're studying further, you can comment, and this is contact information for my colleague Neha. We'll be collecting comments. So this is a range of some of the topics that we look at in the EIS process. So community and social impacts, transportation, physical and environmental impacts, environmental justice, and parks. So the whole range of topics that was previously studied in the final EIS, will refresh that information and look at the whole range for the areas of the project that are new. So we're kicking off preparation of our supplemental draft EIS here with this notice, this announcement. And the purpose of this first step is to compare where we have multiple options, identify what the impacts are, look at the benefits, and down the line, we would identify a preferred option. And then when the supplemental draft EIS is published, then we'll have a public hearing and further engagement, you know, about the results. And in the time in between, we expect to be, you know, speaking with you all on, you know, what analysis we're performing, and if there's, you know, key pieces of information or knowledge sharing that the community may have that could help inform our environmental review.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. Well, we're now gonna kick it off to C. Terrence. We didn't get a chance to introduce you. C. Terrence, you're gonna just go ahead and introduce yourself and just say a little bit about the amazing work you're doing on anti-displacement.
Right on. Thanks, Congo. It's good to be with everybody. Yeah, sorry I was late. I was coming from another meeting, probably when introductions are going around. I'm C. Terrence Anderson, Director of Community-Based Research at the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, or CURA, at the University of Minnesota. Maybe you've heard about our work, maybe you haven't. Before I sort of jump into what we've been up to recently, because I know there's some new members, right, for the BAC and the CAC up, so you may not have been cued into this work from the beginning. And by the way, Nikongo, how long do I have for this presentation? I just want to make sure I stay on time.
About 37 minutes.
Okay, great. So, I know there's new folks in the room, and I think I don't think anybody's in here is shy, but please ask as many questions as you'd like. I want this to be more of a discourse than it is sort of me just presenting at each of you. But the subject of our work is, of course, you're talking a lot about how to deliver the Blue Line extension, meaning the rail itself in the streets. Our project, I would say, is off the rails in the sense that it's what happens around the light rail in and of itself. And so we're thinking explicitly about how do we make sure that this line benefits the folks who currently live within the Blue Line extension corridor. More importantly, make sure that they're not displaced from the Blue Line extension corridor as a result of this, pretty significant investment. And, I think one thing to sort of think about is that we're not just thinking about in the context of before construction, during construction, but we're thinking over the lifespan of this line in sort of the sense, like, how do we make sure that there's the different policies, programs, and investments that will allow businesses as well as residents, and we're also thinking of cultural displacement as well, but how to make sure that the elements that are there today, the best of it that are there today, remain in place, and if not, make sure that they're better off as a result of our work. So we've been doing this work since probably about December of last year, really. And we have the meeting of the Anti-Displacement Working Group, which is a collection of government folks, philanthropic folks, and community folks, both from organizations and not from organizations, that have been meeting and talking about this work for a number, over the course of this time. We sort of are meeting in this sort of smaller structure. We're not meeting every month. Really, the cadence of this project is moving almost quarterly, I would say. What we sort of tagline around is we have 4 full Saturday meetings where we're meeting all Saturday, basically from 9 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon around different topics. And we just had our second meeting on September 24th. Just for the folks who are in this room who didn't hear our update from the first Saturday meeting, which happened on June 4th. And June 4th, I think what I like to say is we started at 10,000 feet. We talked about really what can we learn from the existing Blue and Green lines? What was their experience around gentrification and displacement, or I say explicitly displacement, and what can we really learn in this context? And we ended that meeting with 27 different anti-displacement policies that were presented and talked about in that group. And really the center of that conversation was like, hey, at the 10,000 foot level, we already know that there's 27 different policies, 27 things that we can do, right? And the question, I think, for us is that we're not going to get straight to the ground, right? We're not going to get to implementation through this process, but it's getting to, say, 500 feet from the ground, where we know reasonably the things that we recommend out of this group will do what we think it will do, prevent displacement amongst residents, businesses, and cultural displacement as well. And so we, over the course of the summer, we've been sort of working from those 27 different policies into a conversation with the Anti-Displacement Working Group just a couple Saturdays ago, where we really are focused on landscaping those 27 different policies. And what I mean by that was we surveyed each of the different governments along the line. So that included each of the cities, Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park, as well as Hennepin County, the Met Council, and Hennepin County as well, and the Minneapolis Parks Board, about basically where they sort of felt themselves around these 27 different policies. Were these things that they were already doing? Was it things that they would be likely to do? Things that they likely to do both in a leadership role or a resourcing role? Or was it something that they felt a resistance around for various reasons? And so we surveyed them and sort of queued them up in what we call our internal working groups to sort of show up in this conversation on September 24th with an understanding of like, okay, how do we need to match where governments are at with where community might feel we need to go. And so that's also what we talked about on September 24th was what were the policies, or what are the policies that were important for community for us to really focus on, and sort of match that with where philanthropic and governmental folks are as well. So we landscape that work, or those 27 different policies, to get a better sense of say, where's community and government aligned, where's there might be a tad bit of misalignment, and where do we need to put a lot of work in for here to go. So this landscaping, I think, was actually a quite powerful body of work, because I think there is a better and more clear understanding between government and community about what we should be doing about that. And I would say, in addition to these 27 different policies, both government folks, community folks, and philanthropic folks really felt that there was a couple more policies for us to look at as well. And so I think we're in a good place. I'll sort of talk about in just a couple slides from now about where our direction is from here. If you want to know what all those 27 different anti-displacement policies are, they're presented, or they're published on Hennepin County's website. I believe they're on My Blue Line EXT, or you could check Kira's website, so kira.umn.edu, and you'll be able to find a place for to find the notes from the last meeting on June 4th, and you'll be able to see them there. Or of course, I can send them out to this group directly, and that's perfectly good as well too. But there's a mix in there, right? There's investment-centered policies, there's value capture-centered policies. Maybe just go back a slide there just for a second, and all sorts of things that are in there, right? I think what I want to focus on somewhat, since we have more time in our conversation today, is I think we left the first meeting in June 4th where I think a lot of these sort of processes would end, which is, okay, here's 27 different policies, implement them all, make them work. I think what we're theorizing more within this process is that it's about aligning resources and thinking. Sometimes I like to say shared language, analysis, and power is really what we're focused on in the context of this anti-displacement working group. And so it's not just naming those 27 policies, but it's about really getting it to enough of a place where policymakers, community, and others can sort of see more clearly the pathway to implementing those anti-displacement policies, right? So it's not just enough to talk about that they exist and to demand them, but there's more work about aligning resources, aligning analysis, aligning roles, things of that nature to really get to the implementing aspect of it. And so we're thinking about that there. The other part of what we really focused on in September 24th was that structure for recommendations. And that goes into, right, what makes all this effort from community and the part of this project realized into real impact. And so it's not, again, it's not just about recommending to do 27 things, but it's also delivering a sense of transparency and accountability. And of course, most importantly, follow through on the recommendations that come from this table. And so we spent a lot of time on September 24th as well, sort of asking, what does transparency and accountability look like? What do governments and other implementers need to hear from these recommendations in order for them to see more clearly the pathway to implement them? And all those sort of questions that can sort of deliver the higher aspirations of this project, which is, we can't mandate that governments will do this work, but I think we can find, of course, some consensus among these ideas that really deliver problem to impact, and we can align the resources in order to do those things. So jumping to the next slide, what we came out of our recent work, and and I'm really going over a lot of things very quickly. And so again, I think if folks have questions and clarifying questions, please ask. But there's really sort of 4 pathways that we sort of have gained from this meeting on September 24th around how these 27 plus policies can sort of be advanced from where we are today to what we hope is the recommendations into sort of the implementation aspect of it. So there's 4 pathways that we're really thinking of. The first one, existing policies. Then there's likely policies, leadership or resourcing role, and this is from the perspective of governments, policies with resistance, and new policies. So the existing policies is sort of centered around, among those 27 different policies, things that governments are saying that they're already doing. So those things can include land disposition policies, commercial development funds, of course, they could be doing rent stabilization work, right, or a whole bunch of different things that the governments are doing. But not, if you sort of examine those policies, not all of them probably point towards the need that exists within the Blue Line extension. So say, for example, governments may already have a land disposition policy, but it may be inadequate or not intentionally targeted to the type of displacement and land disposition that might exist as a result of the Blue Line extension. And so some of the tagline of what we're doing is, how do we make those policies blue? In the sense of like, how do we sort of rescope, reintention, reimagine, particularly target or intentionalize those existing policies that match the need of the Blue Line extension, right? So is there enough for programs that may be dispersing money? How much money are in those programs? What's the geographic sort of spreading of those policies? And how might those need to change in order to sort of match the need amongst the Blue Line extension? And then, so that's the number one way that's the first way we're going to sort of look into the pathways of the different anti-displacement policies. The second ones, and the rest of them, are all things that folks aren't currently doing. And so this is the first category within that, is sort of the likely policies that governments see themselves in a leadership or resourcing role. So those are policies that they basically agree with, like, this is very possible within the politics of our organization, within the resourcing of our organization, within the legal framework of our organization or jurisdiction of the organization or government. And so this is something that we can really do, but we need some more details about what it's going to take for us to do that. Policies with resistance are sort of the things amongst those 27 different policies that governments are sort of saying, like, this is kind of unlikely given either our resource capacity, our staff expertise, maybe their jurisdictional responsibility, those different things. But we sort of broke down in sort of more particular ways. Sorry, you might hear my kids. In more particular ways about why there might be resistance around those policies, but we're going to sort of spend more time on them because they're still important to community to get done. And so we'll sort of talk about, okay, if this is a resource problem, how can we sort of match the resources in order to make it happen? If this is an expertise issue, where can we find the expertise, right? We don't want to sort of say no to things just for the sake of not being able to figure out the problem, but we really want to figure out why, and maybe it's possible, especially if they sort of are the right impact that's needed to the problems that might be experienced in various ways relative to displacement, right? And then there's sort of new policies, and by new policies, I mean that they weren't initially on the 27 policy list, but came up in the context of our conversation on September 24th that we still need to spend time and focus on. We put them as new policies because they were policies that were not surveyed amongst governments, nor had they sort of been vetted in community through our qualitative research or quantitative research in that way too. Within all of those things, we need to sort of consider the problems that we're trying to be addressed. So we're going to match that with the qualitative and quantitative data, as well as what's been talked about within the context of the anti-displacement working group. We want to match with the impact that we hope to have, right? So folks may, there are, of course, in various ways, some policies that match the right impact might already being done, but we need to just sort of revise them, or it may need to take a new body of resourcing in order to make them happen, and those sort of things too. We need to look at a cost analysis. So how much would how much needs to be spent within these different policies in order to get to the impact that's hopeful? And of course, think about the strategy for implementation, right? Is this a before construction, a during construction, or an after construction centered policy? Those different sort of things. What community groups really need to be more involved when you go from idea to implementation? Those different strategic aspects of these different policies. There's 27 plus things, probably closer to 32, I think, if we're looking all said and done from our meeting on September 24th. There's a lot of overlapping in impact to what these policies are prescribed to do. Like, say, there's many different value capture mechanisms or policies that could be implemented, but what's the right one? And so there's a question for the anti-displacement working group, and I think perhaps for some of y'all too, if you sort of dig into these into our work as an anti-displacement working group, we probably need to prioritize amongst these policies to really focus on, right, I say going from 10,000 feet about these policies exist to 500 feet from the ground, which is like we're pretty certain that this is the right thing that we need to do, and it needs to move forward into the implementation phase of this work. And so I don't think the hard work was coming up with these policies. The hard work, and I think this is for all of us, is to find the right policies and align mutually and in consensus in our community to deliver the right package. And so really that's where the body of our work is being spent towards for really the remainder of the time that we're in this project. And then of course, getting hopefully to a good platter of recommendations to be implemented by various entities. Going to the next slide. So one of the things that I want y'all to think about, and I think this is, of course, a big question for policymakers themselves, right? There's one thing I think to say, hey, do change your land disposition policy. And there's another thing to say, and this is the way in particular it needs to be changed. And what I mean by that is that we're trying to speak to the heart of what the questions will be about our recommendations and what are sort of the considerations that we need to have in order to for them to have a high degree of success for implementation, right? I think a lot of folks have been around for projects or been a part of groups like this where community is sort of communicating their needs, but then don't necessarily see the folks that they are sort of communicating to following up on those recommendations or feedback, right? And so what we're distinctly trying to care for is that exact experience. And so part of that is by matching with what the needs for what governments need to hear within the process so that they can speak transparently and with some semblance of accountability to the folks who are delivering that feedback or recommendations so that they can be cognizant of those needs as they're making the recommendations. And so when we're thinking about the recommendation structure themselves, when we make recommendations, I think they need to be comprised of 7 different things. This needs to be affirmed by the Anti-Displacement Working Group, which we're hoping to do this month, but I'm putting this out to y'all because you're part of the receiving bodies of folks who will see these recommendations and hopefully see yourselves in the things that you want in them and sort of can carry the torch of advocating for them as well too. But the recommendation structure we see, of course, I think it should be comprised of 7 different things. The policies themselves, but I think, the policies say if it's rent control, rent stabilization, there's, many different iterations of rent control around the country, right? And I don't think there's even really 1-2 policies that are similar across different jurisdictions, right? And so there's more than just saying the policy, but really need to sort of poke into like who's doing the policy. So let's talk about the role. Who's going to implement this different work? Who do you think is the right jurisdiction? Who's the right funding partners? How does community play a role in delivering these recommendations? Different things like that. So we don't want to sort of leave this process with somebody do this, but we feel within our process of understanding these policies, this is the right entity to implement it. And sometimes it's multiple. Actually, a lot of the times it's multiple entities delivering a set policy. So say, for example, Brooklyn Park brought up in our September 24th meeting, delivering sort of a community-centered business hub. Well, the city had a role, Hennepin County had the role, the Met Council had a role, and community all had a role in delivering and that thing. And I think a lot of these policies will be similar to that. And so the recommendations should be cognizant of that. Cost. I think there's, of course, money that needs to be a part of a lot of these policies or will take money to deliver these policies, whether that's in the context of staff or say it's in the context of grants or whatever it might be. There's usually going to be a cost, but not always a cost to delivering these policies. And so we're not trying to understand the final cost of doing that, but we're going to try to get in the neighborhood of understanding how much should be put into it. And that's on the size of the problem, not into what we think is not what governments are saying are available. So if we think X amount of dollars is going to take to build enough affordable housing to ensure that folks aren't displaced, then it's going to be recommended on what's needed, not on what's possible, though we're hoping to match possible and need, of course, as much as we can through this process. Impact and measurement for success, right? Policies can be implemented in a number of different ways. We want to be intentional about naming what impact we hope that those policies have, because again, the specific design of these policies can have different impacts. Again, rent control, very complicated, can have different impacts the way that you design each aspect of that policy. And so we want to speak to the intentionality of what should come out of this as well. And I think the other thing, I think part of accountability is having a measurement for success, right? So it's not just build some affordable housing, but how much affordable housing, right? If it's this many housing needs to fall under a rent control policy, or no, say this quartile of housing needs to sort of fall under it because that's where the largest experience of rising rents might be, right? We really want to speak to those particular measurements that will help address transparency and accountability of what we're trying to get to in the implementation aspect of it. There might be legal considerations for aspects of this. So saying a land disposition policy, right? You're really talking about legal instruments. And if we're recommending for a land disposition policy to have a different impact, we're really getting into the legality of the policies. Timing, right? It's not just abstracting when we should do these policies. Different policies have different relevance to the time period in which displacement might occur, right? Before construction, during construction, after construction, say for businesses that might have difficulty for their clients to sort of find that space, whether that's on parking or navigability around the construction experience, all those things. That's a really during construction time period that we really need to be focusing on. And so we want to make sure that we match the right policy for the right time period, of course. Examples can include both examples of how these policies were implemented and the impact intended around the country. So like, look at this model where this other folks did it, but it also can be like, this is where we heard it from our experience of engaging community as well too. And so we really want to connect experience within community and the need demonstrated there, as well as along with like, hey, this is done before, you don't need to be scared about it. And then, of course, implementation strategy or plan. So getting into sort of those nuances of how this policy might be implemented. There may be other things. If there's other things that you feel like you need to hear about these recommendations in order to sort of feel the pathway forward for them, then I encourage you to sort of share that, right? And say if you're receiving this as a decision maker, what more do you need to know about these recommendations? Again, we're really trying to break down the barrier between I just never heard about it or I don't know how to do it. And so we need to sort of instill a longer process or different process to really replicate the same thing that we can do in this process, which is let's align roles, let's align resources, let's consider where governments are already moving and where community feels the impact needs to have. And so we're trying to break down sort of the capacity knowledge barrier, of course, as much as we can when delivering these recommendations at the end of the day. Going to the next slide. So the other thing about, so like if this group is the recommending body of folks, we of course have to think about who are the people that are going to receive it. So of course it'll come back to this committee in a sense, but really at the end of the day, the BAC, the CAC are probably not the implementing bodies for these policies, but perhaps of course you're part of the accountability aspect, or maybe individually you might find yourself in the future being in the implementation aspect of this too. But we're really trying to think towards like the time investment, the energy that people are expecting to. We don't want to waste that. And of course, we don't want to leave this process as others might have, which is we made these recommendations and then they disappeared and nobody knew about it, knew what happened with them. Maybe they reappear, maybe they don't, but there's sort of a lack of visibility around how to go from where we are right now, connecting to the future. So part of our charge within this process is to help define that, right, and help build that structure. And in my mind, hopefully that structure will shape form and begin to exist before our project is over, right, before the recommendations are finally given. And so around these ideas of transparency, and I think even more distinctly accountability, I think is really important as we're thinking about that. And so the question could be, how will y'all know we're doing like this had any impact, that this really delivered what it was supposed to do? And so as we're thinking about that, I think some of the elements that need to be there as we're building that structure is it still needs to be comprised of both community and staff, right? So some folks who have been part of this process for a long time know that we have internal working groups, which is each government sort of brings together who they believe will be a part of implementing different anti-displacement strategies. And we're sort of talking to them about, okay, what do you need to hear? What do you need to know, right? Did the folks who we gave the survey in the first place around the 27 different policies, probably those same body of people and probably a more specific body of community should probably have some sort of convening with each other to sort of receive these recommendations and move them through the official policymaking processes. This is probably similar to many existing groups that exist today, but we sort of need to figure that out. We are sort of looking at the policies in place, of course, right? We're want to make those blue, but there's a complementary aspect of some policies need to be changed. Some policies need to come into existence for the first time in this region. And so folks need to sort of shepherd that work. And of course, we're trying to be cognizant of that in the recommendations themselves too. And so those are very specific instruments within like the government's receiving it. But as I sort of said, there's often multiple roles amongst different actors in the delivery, the implementation of the different policies possible. And so there's still very much, I'm sure, going to need to be necessary for a global convening of some sort as well, right? So if we sort of imagine, and I want and hope that people are imagining in this way, and hopefully Dan doesn't mind saying, but like our group, Anti-Displacement Working Group, is dreaming of $1 billion that need to be focused on putting together $1 billion to address anti-displacement. Let's just say that's what happens, and hopefully that is what happens, and maybe even more, right? But someone's going to have to think strategically across this corridor about the delivery of those resources, making sure that the different roles are at the table and ready to implement, so that things don't get funny at the end of it. But as well as thinking about how to keep this body of folks together, right? Anti-displacement, of course, is going to have local impacts, but it's going to be regional in outcome, right? So folks displaced from Minneapolis are probably going to displace along this corridor, perhaps into different places, right? That's already the experience for folks, right? So who's holding all of that at sort of a regional level? There's probably still a body, a global convening body that's going to have to receive this as well too. And so we're thinking about both the individual impact to organizations and how to sort of keep transparency and accountability in a sense of moving forward from here, right? And connected recommendation 1 month, starting the implementation next month, perhaps, as well as still considering to think at the global convening. And we're really thinking about in the implementer's role. So who the folks who are going to bring money to the table, who the folks who are going to bring different resources like expertise and staff and different things like that, who's going to connect to community at the end of this. Of course, it's not enough just for governments to say they're doing something, but it's also connecting that work to the folks who really need it, right? That's probably another enterprise that needs to be activated in advance of this as well too. So we're really thinking about the recommendation process, not just from the perspective of what we're trying to do in this group, but what's going to be cared for, or how it's going to be cared for once it leaves the Anti-Displacement Working Group's table. So going to the next slide. So in the implementation, right, we're really thinking, right, that's phase 2. Phase 1 is the recommendations itself. Phase 2, get $1 billion and spend it in community, right? And I keep joking about that. I'm just going to try to speak it into existence. But there's the getting to the dollars to deliver, right, and talking about all the different resource possibilities. It's about sort of drafting that more specific plan for implementation, right? So we're going to try to get these recommendations to 500 feet, right? I'm not going all the way to the ground, and I have to be very distinct about that because this isn't an official policymaking process, so we really can't emulate that. But we can try to tie into it as much as we can through an effective management structure that does bring it from 500 feet to on the ground as well, right? So there's going to be an even deeper dive, but we're going to sort of try to point it in as much as the right directions, but it'll be filled in with the actual dollars that are sort of aligned, the actual resources that are aligned, the actual staff and expertise that exist or could be created. And as it works through an effective management structure, right? I don't think that this is a non-existent thing. It's already happening in the context of delivering the rails, right? We just need to sort of make sure there's a complementary coexisting structure for the anti-displacement policies themselves, right? We know they're actually moving to delivering rails in the ground because there's a structure that says that's going to happen. Community, we all know that there needs to be a structure that says we are going to deliver anti-displacement policies too, and we'll know it because that structure exists. And so, that phase 2 implementation, that phase 2 implementation should be that structure that sort of equally communicates that we have the ability, capacity, and intention to do the same thing. So with that, I think that might be the last slide.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I guess what I'll say is, the next steps for our process really is, we really need to affirm with the Anti-Displacement Working Group that we're of the right mind and pointed in the right direction with these 27 different policies in the right direction way to go forward, as well as start developing that structure for implementation and the recommendation structure too. And, we'll be, of course, connecting with community as well. We've been doing, of course, open houses alongside Hennepin County and the Met Council and the overall delivery of this project. So I'll be hanging out with Nkongo quite a bit, which I'm looking forward to. And, that's really an effort to get it out into community, so that folks can sort of continue to chime in and communicate about this work and make sure that matches as well, too. I said a lot. You'll probably have questions. I'll stop there.
Thank you, C. Terrence. Appreciate the work you're doing. And I'll pass the baton to Jason and see if Jason would like to lead us into the discussion piece of this. That's okay, Jason, with you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, C. Terrence. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just from the CAC and the BAC members on the call, are there any questions or comments for C. Terrence?
Guess it all.
So I will, I'll ask this question just because we've been. Oh, go ahead.
I'll
Sorry.
say this. C. Terrence said a whole lot
Yeah.
in a very, very short span of time, and that was a lot of information to try and absorb and digest.
True. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I owe James for a coffee for a long time, so I got to follow up with that. But yeah, I know I said a lot. There's even a lot more that I could say about this too. And so I think some of the slowest ways are we need to sort of practice a more slow way too about how we communicate this information. And so I'm open to that too, whether that means getting together for lunch. I've been doing that a ton over the course of this project, and so maybe that's what makes sense, especially for the new members coming in who might have less context about how and why we're doing this work too. So I think I can offer that for sure.
And I will say, just for the new people that haven't, I mean, any of these meetings and all of the anti-displacement discussions, there's they had a 10-hour meeting. There was so much information to cover that they can't cover it all. It can't all be presented here. But if C. Terrence, if you could just distill this down, or I guess just the way that I process the information, we went from having a myriad of topics in that first June meeting where it was just everything out on the table to now it sounds like we're getting to a place where some of these ideas are kind of consolidating around, where you're going to focus your attention, how with the policies piece, what's already in place, where to make changes. So it's now starting, it seems to me in the September meeting was more around taking all those loose ends of the June meeting, kind of pulling it together a little bit and solidifying some of the direction forward. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. And I just want to simplify this as much as possible, right? I think what we're doing is trying to unlock sort of the silos that might exist, that do exist, and would prevent this work from happening, right? So we're aligning different governments, philanthropy, to get together to put together a body of resources to address these things as well as implement policy. The question for community is, what are the right policies, right? So I think if you hear anything in this, and you don't even have to speak in the language of those 27 policies. I just want to hear what's the problem that needs to be solved and what's the impact that you think needs to have when we solve it. That's really sort of the simple way to think about it. And yeah, I think Nick's right, Jason's right. We're just trying to work it down a funnel into understanding problem and impact, and then aligning those resources to deliver it. That's the simplest way to say it. And of course, there's a lot of actions to do that, but I think that's all you really need to think about. And we're trying to put that together in the back end, and hopefully you see that too.
And I don't want to speak for the BAC, but I know from a CAC perspective, it's really as we go out in the community and get feedback and ask questions and talk to people and spread the word about what is going on with this project. Those are what C. Terrence is doing and the work that the anti-displacement cohort and the group and Cura is doing is really giving us an avenue for when you hear from constituents and residents and whoever it is that there's an issue that needs to be addressed, that we have avenues to help them through that, whether that's feeling like they're going to be displaced or not part of the project or not involved with the construction or I mean, there's a myriad of things. There's 27 policies, which seems like a ton, but that list was probably even longer before now. So make sure that if you get that feedback, and that we should be reaching out to our communities for this feedback, because it's really important work what C. Terrence is doing, and it's much needed in this project. The other projects on the rail corridor didn't have this level of engagement this early with anti-displacement, and so obviously they're doing a ton of great work, but we're kind of the eyes and ears out in the community and with businesses to get feedback and help.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right, Jason. I just want folks to feel like this is possible, right? And I think if you sort of looked over the materials from the last meeting, of those 27 policies, I think there was 14 of them that governments and community pretty much already agreed that either they should do or should be doing, right? Like that they're already doing or they could and should be doing, right? There's 14 of those 27 things that they're like, yeah, that sounds right. Right? The win is right there, right? And so I just want folks to feel like this isn't just an abstract conversation. This is like a deliberate, intentional one to deliver real resources in the community. And like we're halfway, half of those things are like, yes. So I think let's just dream together. And I think we're also going to be practical together. And I think it'll be good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. And I'd like to see if there are any last minute questions, any comments. Please feel free to speak. All right. Well, hearing none and seeing none in the chat, I'd like to thank you all for your time. I'm going to give closing remarks to Jason so he could go ahead and give those closing remarks. But I just wanted to acknowledge that this was a very long meeting, 2 hours, and thank you for staying through the entire meeting. As we move forward, these meetings are going to be shorter as we break up into our smaller groups, CAC and BAC. Please feel free to reach out to us. You got our email address. If there's anything that comes up, we can connect you up with C. Terrence. Or if you have any specific question about the project, please feel free to reach out to your outreach coordinator. You could also reach out to me as well. I'm also on the invite. You can find me on the invite as well. Yep. And then I'll turn it over to Jason and see if Jason has any closing remarks.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you to the project staff for presenting us today and bringing this together as an interim meeting. So just getting us more information, which we always appreciate. I will be attending the CMC meeting on Thursday, but we will reconvene separately as the BAC and the CAC. I believe the BAC is the BAC is on November 1st and the CAC is on November 2nd, and that will truly start the new phase of our engagement in these projects. So thank you to everyone that's come back, to all the new people that are joining us, and looking forward to all of the work that we're going to do to help the Blue Line as a successful project.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Buenas noches.